Okay, so today we're going to be solving quadratic equations using the quadratic formula. You can see the quadratic formula here on the screen as well as on your paper. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all divided by 2a. So remember that the quadratic formula helps us to solve or find solutions to quadratic equations. And this plus or minus is where we get two different solutions from. So we can use the quadratic formula to find solutions to any quadratic equation. We just need it to be in standard form in order to find a, b, and c, and then substitute into the equation. So when we look at the first example here, we have x squared equals negative 2x minus 24. We know that a equals 1, that b equals negative 2, and that c equals negative 24. So it's important to keep the negative signs with the b and with the c term. Okay, so now we know that x equals negative b, but my b is already negative, so I'm going to make that a positive 2, plus or minus, let me grab my pen here, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so of negative 2 squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is negative 24. Now I should extend my square root symbol because all of this is under that radical. Then we need to divide this entire thing by 2 times a, or 2 times 1. I'm going to put this into math type equation so it looks a little nicer. X equals, I'm going to bring up my whole fraction here. So we have negative b, or positive 2, plus or minus the square root of b squared, or negative 2 squared, negative 2 squared minus 4 times a times c, which was negative 24, all divided by 2 times a, which is 1. Okay, so that's what we had written out here with my pen, and here is what our quadratic formula says. So when you type this into your calculator or when you simplify, you always want to start with inside your square root first. So negative 2 squared would give us 4 minus 4 times 1 is 4 times negative 24. You want to multiply all of that first. So inside of your radical, you should end up with, and let's do this now. Negative 2 squared becomes 4. Remember to put that into your calculator as negative 2 in parentheses squared. And then here we have negative 4 times 1 times negative 24. Negative times a negative is going to give us a positive, and we're going to end up with plus 96, all divided by 2 times 1, which is 2. So that's our next step here. Now we're going to add those two inside the radical together. 96 plus 4 is going to give us 100. And we have 2 plus or minus the square root of 100 over 2. Now we can actually take that square root if we can. If you cannot, you're going to use your simplifying radicals. We can take the square root of 100, so we end up with 2 plus or minus the square root of 100 is 10. So 2 plus or minus 10 over 2. And since we can actually do that, here's where we want to separate that out into 2 plus 10 divided by 2 and 2 minus 10 divided by 2. So x equals 2 plus 10 would give us 12. So x equals 12. divided by 2, which is going to give us 6. X equals 6. And x equals 2 minus 10, which is going to give us a negative 8. X equals negative 8 divided by 2. Which is going to give us negative 4. So we know that x equals positive 6 and negative 4. So this particular quadratic equation had two different solutions, and they had real solutions because we square rooted a positive number here. So on the next example, I'm going to have you work this one out, but you should end up with only one solution, and that happens when the number inside of the square root or inside of the radical becomes 0. And then when we work out this one, let's go ahead and do this one together. We're going to end up with no real solutions. So we know that a equals negative 2, that b equals 6, and that c equals negative 5. So we're going to go ahead and set up our quadratic formula here. So we know that x equals negative b, and our b term is 6. So we're going to say negative 6 plus or minus the square root of b squared, which we know is 6. So 6 squared minus 4 times a, which is negative 2, times c, which is negative 5, all divided by 2 times a, or 2 times negative 2. There we go. Okay, so there we substituted a, b, and c into our quadratic formula, and now we want to go ahead and simplify inside of the radical, or inside of the square root. So here, 6 squared becomes 36. Negative 4 times negative 2 is positive 8, times a negative 5 is going to result in a negative 40. All over 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. So that's our next step. Now we want to go ahead and subtract 36 minus 40 inside of our square root. And 36 minus 40 is going to give us a negative 4. And this week, we do not know how to square root a negative. So at this point, we would say that there is no real solutions. Next week, we will learn how to take that square root of a negative. So this particular quadratic had no real solutions. Okay, go ahead and pause this video, and I want you to try example number 4. And then you can check with the answer key of the completed notes online to verify your solution to both number 2 and number 4. We're going to go ahead and jump to the next part. So a particular part of the quadratic formula, which is the part under the square root symbol, is called the discriminant. This is the b squared minus 4ac part of the quadratic formula. That's called the discriminant. And the discriminant determines the number of real solutions that your quadratic equation has. So if b squared minus 4ac was a positive number, we have 2 real solutions. If b squared minus 4ac, or the number inside of your square root, was 0, we had 1 solution. And if it was a negative number, we have no real solutions. And you can see the graphs over here on the right. When we get to graphing quadratics, we'll see that when our discriminant is positive, we have 2 x-intercepts on our graph. When our discriminant equals 0, that means the vertex is on the x-axis, or we only have 1 x-intercept. And when the discriminant is less than 0, or a negative number, we have no x-intercepts. So you can use the discriminant to determine the number of solutions and how many solutions. Now remember that every quadratic is degree 2, so it should have 2 solutions. It just means they may not be real. So we would go ahead and we would do b squared minus 4ac. We know that a is equal to 9, b B is equal to 6 and C equals 1. And so if we do B squared, let's clear this out. B squared we know that our B term is 6, so we're going to do 6 squared minus 4 times A, which is 9, times C, which is 1. And you can go ahead and type all of that into your calculator or multiply this out. We know that 6 squared is 36 minus 4 times 9, so we know this becomes 36. 4 times 9 times 1 is going to be also 36. And so we end up with 36 minus 36, or we end up with 0. That means, since our discriminant is 0, that means we have one real solution, and we call this a double root. That means that that one real solution counts twice. So go ahead and try the next 2 examples. Pause this video, and then I want you to check your solutions with the answer key online again. And that is solving quadratics using the quadratic formula.